Recently, I was surfing the web and encountered this cool neon negative effect. Let's try to recreate it. After loading an image, first thing I would like to do is to convert this to a pixel layer by right-clicking on it and then use the rasterize and trim option. The reason why I will be using pixel layers is that I'm going to make duplicates of this layer and link the pixel content. This allows me to quickly change the image, or in this case the pixel content, and have the same effect applied to a new image. So let me duplicate this layer either by pressing Command J or just by using the duplicate menu item from the context menu on the layers panel. As mentioned, I'm going to link the pixel content. For this, I will need the link panel. If this is not enabled for you, you can enable it from the view menu. To link them, I can select the original and drag and drop the duplicated layer from the layers panel into the pixel content checkbox in the layers panel. This will now link these two layers on pixel content, meaning changing the pixel content on one of them will update the other. Notice the link icon indicating that the pixel content is linked. On the duplicate, I'm going to apply a procedural texture filter. The idea is to create an inverted red look. I will keep the red, set the green and the blue to 1 and use the inverted red values for alpha. This generates a nice cyan inverted look. Let's zoom out and flip this layer. Then make it quite bigger and position it to our liking. The idea is to get a kind of a glitch effect. I'm going to make another duplicate of the original. But before moving on, let's name our layers for clarity. The top layer is our first effect, so it will be named Effect 1, and the second duplicate will contain the next effect, so let's name this to Effect 2 and move it to the top. Also notice how the pixel content is still linked. Just like the first effect, I'm going to add a procedural texture to it, but this time the idea is to get an inverted green look. A quick way to get that is by keeping the red and the blue, setting the green to 1 and using an inverted alpha based on R and B, which translates into the formula 1 minus the minimum of R or B. Nice. Let's quickly make it a bit bigger and reposition it. Pretty cool. However, we lost what the image was all about. So, time to apply a blend mode for these two effects. I'm going to put both of these effect layers to darken blend mode, which results in a nice glitchy image. Our effects are done and now time to color it in a neonish way. To do that, I will use a gradient map adjustment, which will allow us to map the color to different colors based on intensity. I'm going to use blue, purple and yellow to get that neon look. But in fact, you can use any color combination you like. To make the effect a bit stronger, I'm going to add some additional points so that the base colors will have a broader range in the image. After that, it is a bit of playing around and tuning until you find a good balance which works well for your image. You can move or transform the two effect layers to fine-tune it to your liking. Pretty awesome. Let's have a quick look on the before and the after. Optionally, you can now add some grungy texture to spice up the image. Let me paste a grunge texture on top of the composition and change the blend mode to overlay. Nice. Here is another texture, but this time I'm going to move it around and have it applied to a specific area to make the composition a bit more interesting. I'm going to use the color burn blend mode this time. But as you notice, this is way too strong and with the help of opacity, we can tune it down to our needs. Let's add one more texture, but this time I will use the linear burn with a low opacity. Just like with the previous texture, I'm going to reposition it. Pretty cool. As a final step, we can add some noise to it. Instead of using the noise filter, I'm going to create a noise with a procedural texture filter. I will share the formula in the description if you're interested. In order to have this created noise work for you, I'm going to add a fill layer and move it below the procedural texture. The color is not so important. To be able to fine-tune the noise effect, I'm going to add a curves adjustment on top. In the curves adjustment, I will modify the curve into a flat S-curve so we have more gray values. Now it's time to group these three layers and then change the blend mode of the group to overlay. Let's zoom in to take a closer look to see the noise. The cool part is now that with the curves adjustment I can control the noise effect to our liking. In this case, I feel the noise has darkened the image too much, so I'm going to use a more inverted curve, which makes the noise lighter and better fitting with the end result. Awesome, and our effect is done. Another quick look at the before and the after. As mentioned in the beginning of the video, because we used linked pixel layers, it would be fairly easy to apply the effects to another image. Let's add a different image and reposition it in the canvas. When ready, I will move it just above the original layer. The idea is now to replace the original layer content, which will then update the effect layers we created earlier. Interesting. Either I made a mistake somewhere or there is some kind of a bug here. Notice how the original layer is no longer linked. Strange. Anyway, not a big deal. I can link it back to the effect. To replace the original layer, I can now use the merge down function from the layers context menu. This will replace the pixel content of the layer below with the pixel content of the current layer. If we look closely, it did automatically replace the content of effect 1, but not of layer effect 2. Let's relink that one also back to the original. Perfect. We can now reposition the effect layers to better fit with this image. As this is a quite dark image compared with the image we started with, I can modify the gradient fill to get a bit more details in the image. Optionally, we can also add a curves adjustment on top of the original to brighten up the image and readjust the gradient. Another cool option is to use an HSL adjustment on top of the gradient map to play with the colors. The changes with the HSL adjustment could be a bit too much, but we could try to change the blend mode to soft light, which works very nice in this case. Here is another gradient color scheme with blue and orange, which also works quite well. You can also experiment with green, blue and yellow. I think you get the idea. There is a lot of customization possible if you want to fine-tune your composition. For example, you can apply an HSL adjustment with a mask, so you can paint the areas which should be affected. I will use that technique to dim down the orange color in the center of the image. You can also play around with different positions of the textures, or try different textures and noise patterns and so on. I hope you liked this video and found it interesting. Thank you again for watching.